Well, the virus has now killed more than 100 people in China, and new cases have been confirmed around the world.
So you don't want to frighten the American public.
France and South Korea have also got evacuation plans.
But you need to prepare for and assume
strongly warning Americans to avoid all non-essential travel to China.
That this is going to be a real serious problem.
France, Australia, Canada, the US, Singapore, Cambodia, Vietnam, the list goes on.
Health officials are investigating more than 100 possible cases in the US.
Germany, a man has contracted the virus.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
Japan, where a bus driver contracted the virus.
Coronavirus has killed more than 100 people there and infected more than 4,500.
We have to prepare for the worst, always, because if you don't and the worst happens.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome to War Room Pandemic, live from Capitol Hill, our nation's capital, Fort Defiance. It's Thursday, the 23rd of April, the year of our Lord 2020. Yes, if it's a Thursday, it means another brutal jobs report. What was it, negative 4.4 million? Just another. I think we've shedded now every job we've created in the last 11 years. Episode 134, 135, War Room Pandemic, now with 6.4 million downloads. I'm still waiting for those numbers to back up our hundreds of millions of views. Andy Badolato and Vish Burra. AmericasVoice.net on Dish Channel 219, the John Fredericks Radio Network, Newsmax TV, now in 70 million homes. You can see it later at night. Also FM 99.1, 103.9 in Chicago. Throughout the world in Mandarin on G News and GTV, and of course in English language on IRRS and Nexus.org on shortwave, medium wave, and AM stations throughout the world, reaching 250 million English-speaking people. Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey, Jason Miller, Greg Manns is in the war room. Fish Burr is our producer, so we blame him. Anything goes wrong? Thanks, Fish. Okay, there's so much to get through. I don't even know where to start. Second hour is kind of, I think we're going to dedicate second hour for CCP. So much going on there. But, and I think we're going to talk about Europe in that hour too, because there's so much going on. A big meeting today in Europe to decide how they're going to pull together, if they can. I do think you're seeing the end of the EU, because if they don't pull together for this big stimulus package, I think everybody goes their own way.
End of the Euro first, end of the EU after. And what better day for that news to come out and the slaying of the CCP dragon in the second hour than St. George's Day.
St. George's Day. I'm bringing up my and actually tell me St. George's Day. Okay, we're gonna go to. I wish you had told me that.
I gotta keep something for me to say on it.
I got my St. George's medal right here. Yeah, if they go their own way, there are decades in which nothing happens, and there are weeks in which decades happen. Every week here's a huge week. Let's get into it in the. Let's talk about, and this is for the Liberate guys. We all want to open up the economy as smartly and as quickly as possible. We have to. Everybody understands that. America's not a place that's just, comfortable sitting around, hanging out. We've hung out enough. Everybody's bored. Let's get on with it. But we got to do it smart. Remember, we're the 30 days to save America. We want to go in hard, lock down hard, crash this thing. But hey, took another path. Fine. Kind of a middle path. We're not middle path guys, but that's okay. But coming out here, you got to be smart. What have we been saying from day one? The insurance industry. We have a highly structured economy, even for entrepreneurs. Remember, one thing I tell entrepreneurs when I used to finance them, what makes it, it's not just the vision and the energy and everything like that. You have to understand how to mitigate risk of what you're doing. If you listen to Mark Cuban, the way he thinks, he's always thinking about how do you mitigate risk. That talk he had the other day when we were on the thing, he's saying, hey, I don't want companies that require hundreds of millions of dollars of capital expenditure to build systems, and I don't want somebody that needs hundreds of millions of dollars to market their product. I started with $3,000. In other words, I'm mitigating my risk. I can't get out and raise all this capital, end up with 2% of the company, right? And all this capital at risk, it could blow up, and then I'm gone. Mitigation of risk. One of the ways you mitigate risk is business insurance. There's a massive gunfight right now on Capitol Hill with this whole issue of business insurance and business liability and business stoppage. Had one of the top strike lawyers on the other day, Garagos, right? Who's a guy who can throw a lawsuit at you in a second, getting blown up on CNBC a couple of nights ago. He has a law firm. I know a couple of the partners over there. He has a law firm. He sued for stoppage of business And they had the lawyer, a heavy-duty lawyer, I think from Sullivan & Cromwell, one of these big white shoe law firms, blew him up on national TV, just went through the 10 reasons you're wrong and you're not going to get paid. Okay, so suck on that. This is a big issue. This gets back to the liberated issue, and it gets back to our favorite governor, Governor Kemp, right? Governor Kemp was ahead of the wagon train on this thing yesterday. Did he get blown up yesterday at the press briefing?
Well, he did get blown up. President Trump said that he now disagreed with Governor Kemp. And
Not disagreed. Strongly disagreed.
Strongly disagreed.
And I think he repeated that 3 times, just in case we didn't get it the first time.
Yeah, and President Trump, and this comes after President Trump was appeared to be very supportive of the Liberate movement and what Governor Kemp was doing. President Trump made clear yesterday that he's supportive of all these industries, whether it be barbers, tattoo shops, massage places, nail salons, all of these different service sector type jobs or in small businesses. And he made clear, he's like, look, I'm supportive, but just looking at it. So clearly there were some conversations that were had about, hey, let's talk about how this thing could explode and go nuts.
Because we have two problems. Jack and Raheem, please jump in. We have 2 problems. You have a short-term problem, intermediate term, which is how do I open it up today and more people don't get sick now? And then I have the Dr. Fauci, Dr. Doom and Gloom, just when the president's feeling upside. He's good. The president was pumped up yesterday, and Fauci's got to bring that cloud. It's got to come in from, it's going to be a big one. It is going to be a big one in the fall, right? That's the second problem. But the first one is how do you do it now without more getting sick? And let's talk about the death numbers.
Oh, by the way, Kemp said he's not reversing course.
Oh, he came out and said, I thought he was thinking about upon further review, maybe I hold back tattoo parlors.
Top story in the AJC this morning says that he's staying the course now.
Governor Kemp, profile and courage. A man, the resolved mind can conquer everything, according to Emerson.
And Governor Abbott from Texas expected a massive announcement next week about how exactly they're going to reopen.
Abbott and DeWine are in a different category. Because Kemp was the guy that, to the bitter end, didn't even shut anything down, right? He's swimming in a different lane. Abbott and DeWine are the lead sled dogs here on the conservative red state response of how you open these things up. And DeWine and Abbott are, and I'm not saying Kemp's not, although this thing, I don't know how you keep your distance. So let's go to the death thing first before we come back to this, the death totals. Because here's what the University of Washington comes out, I think last night again, reiterates in an update of the model. It says it's 60,000 deaths at the low end of the case, but that is through August. Right? And that assumes certain things are good. Not a whole shelter in place, like we said. I don't think it's not the whole shelter in place for the entire time. I think they had some caveats on that. But when I look at these deaths, and remember, Antietam, the reason I think people are on hashtag war and pandemic or saying they don't, it's all the Southerners. Sharpsburg, okay? Sharpsburg, remember, they defended the rivers, we had the towns, okay? So.
Well, and by the way, the IHME, what they're saying now is they're going to hey, it's all about testing. That's really going to impact when you can open. So for all these models and all these variables and all these metrics, now they've moved it again, and it's, hey guys, it's really about the testing.
We're going to get to the. Newsom announced some really interesting stuff about that yesterday. They are ramping up the testing, and Newsom also.
Yeah, but he also gave the thing, hey, I don't know, don't hold your breath until we reopen.
But what he did do, which I thought was very interesting, and I think it'll be a trend around the country, Newsom allowed all the hospitals to start doing surgeries again.
Yes.
Elective surgeries, which is huge, because this is going to be the difference between life and death of these hospitals economically.
We got to fly Jason to get that toast. We can go to California and hold a bed for him. Let's get the guy at St. John's Hospital to hold a bed. I want to go back to Mass on Point, but particularly talk about these deaths. The deaths right now is the way the War Room calculates. I think we hit 50 sometime. I think we hit 50 before the weekend. 50,000 before the weekend.
Probably Saturday.
We're going to hit 60,000. We're going to hit 60,000 before the end of April. So I don't know. Somebody's got to tell the president that. So when he comes up on the thing, he understands that, hey, this thing is moving. We're at preseason. Even Kemp hasn't. Kemp is even playing. His scrimmage is a full pads and uniform scrimmage, right? But the game doesn't start to really May 1st with DeWine, Abbott, and these guys unlocking, right? And so now you're going to have 60,000. Somebody's just got to retorque and focus. I think Ambassador Dr. Colonel Burks ought to look at this. So 60,000 is not going to be the low end.
Well, the other thing you got to remember, they keep readjusting this thing. Remember, the low end was going to be, 140,000 2 weeks ago.
I got that. But they just came out last night, and my point is they came out last night, re-emphasized what had to be done. They're still a little jiggy about how much shelter in place, how the reopen goes. But the model, since the White House won't put out a model, this is the model we're dealing with, at least the best one, right? They're saying low end 60,000. I'm just saying, hey, nobody's talking about the fact that every day, what's the rolling 7-day average, Jack Maxey?
2,600. So yeah, it's Antietam.
You have an Antietam Antietam up until 9/11 was in 9/11 included civilians. We have the bloodiest day basically up until 9/11 every day for the last 7 days.
And the IHME folks, they say today their projected death total will be 2,020. Tomorrow it'll be 1,924, and then heading into Saturday, 1,818. So that is...
but they've missed, by the way, not to be too rude, they've missed the projections this week, is I think other people are doing models. I'm not saying the White House. A lot of people have been doing these deaths. This is all I'm saying. We hit a plateau in these deaths, and I realized it a little off yesterday from the day before. We've hit a plateau in these deaths. It's a high plateau. It's a plateau over 2,000 now, and I think that this is the sign that it starts decelerating. But we haven't seen that.
They don't have it dipping below 1,000 a day until May 2nd. That's the first time on their model.
On their model, then you're at 60,000 by April 3rd. That's all I'm saying is that for the president, somebody's got to tell him, hey, we've already blown. You can't use the low end of the scale because we're not out of April and we're going to be at 60,000 dead. Right? If you run the back of the envelope math on their model, on their algorithm, I think you get over 100,000 easy. I think you're at like 120 because May, June, July, you got 90 more days, right?
And remember a week or so back or a week and a half ago, and we said it's Memorial Day. That's what everything's really pointing at.
That's what.
And I know IHME has moved the goalpost a couple of times, but if you look at their projections model, Memorial Day, May 25th, is the first day that the national death total goes below 60. That's when they have it getting down to 58 a day. So when we talk about the Memorial Day really being the point of the full national opening, that still stands pretty correct.
You mean we're going to go from 2,000? I didn't look at that model last night thoroughly. You're saying we're going to go to from 2,100 to 60
by May 25th. That's what they're showing.
That, sir, is impossible. If you just look at the other waves around here, I
think when it started in early March, right, we first got our first deaths, and then you're going to see that's 3 months.
That's the best news That's the best news we ever had. We got to check this. My only point is that they're already off in their low end of the scale because they're going to hit that on April 30th or before.
And also, I mean, what is that taking into account in terms of reopenings? What is that taking into account in terms of mitigation? It doesn't take into account.
They're pretty upfront about that,
right? And so that number is very high.
This gets us back to the Liberate movement, into the which, by the way, we understand and fully agree. Jump back in here of that you should have the full right to do everything. I think as an I'm just sitting there. The key that picks the lock is the insurance, particularly for the small business owners. Remember, Mark Cuban, just to connect some dots here, came in the other day and said, "Hey, if you set what the rules are, American entrepreneurs can get it done."
Is it though? Is it the small businesses or is it the franchisees and the chains? Now, let me tell you why. If you're a Chipotle franchise owner, if you're a McDonald's franchise owner, you're going to have different standards and different things that corporate is telling you, and you're going to have more of this broader risk. And people are, when they find that proverbial, fly in the soup at a McDonald's and they decide, hey, we're going to go and sue, they go after the franchise, they go after the entire company, they go big. But if you're Bob's Tackle Shop down the street, you're opening no matter what. Someone could be standing outside coughing, and you're going to be like, "Hey, I got to open because I don't have any other options."
This is the whole point. So this is the key point right here.
Push back if you think.
No. You've highlighted. This is why this is important. We got a minute. We're not here to entertain you. We're here to educate, to make sure that you're ahead of the wave, because everybody's going to be talking about this next 2 weeks. Everybody is eligible for the PPP. Bob's Tackle Shop, the small guys, not the franchisees, a different issue. Because remember, Bob, if they get sick, it's not just your little cafe. They come after you personally. Okay, they'll take your house. You'll be bankrupt. This is the key. This is why business insurance is so key. That gets you off the hook, right, of personal liability. It is, unless you show recklessness or gross negligence or something like that. But if you go to the standards of the policy, business owners will know what I'm talking about. Then here's two dots to connect. It's Cuban and then Larry Kudlow. We'll get back to all this when we come. How we're going to reopen America. smartly. Okay, return. Hashtag War and Pandemic. Want to hear all your observation. The entire team will be here. We return.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome to War and Pandemic. It's Open America Day. Let's go to the audio tape of Larry Kudlow.
It said about potentially saying that businesses wouldn't be liable, they wouldn't be held liable if their customers or employees get sick when they come back. If that's the case, how do you make sure that the safety standards are still being met and being held so stringently?
Well, look, there's a couple of things there. First of all, safety standards have to be met, and there'll be constant monitoring state by state. I think the states do a very good job. Okay, I have a lot of confidence in the states and the cities, for that matter. And I've been on the conference calls with the governors and the mayors and so forth. So I have a lot of confidence in that. So that's point number one. Point number two is a point that is very important here regarding safeguarding, guardrailing, liability insurance lawsuits, which I am quite concerned about. There was good editorial in the Wall Street Journal today about this subject. Businesses, particularly small businesses who don't have massive resources, should not be held liable, should not be held to trial lawyers putting on false lawsuits that will probably be thrown out of court. You got to give the businesses some confidence here that if something happens, and it may not be their fault, I mean, the disease is an infectious disease. If something happens, you can't take them out of business. You can't throw big lawsuits at them.
So, Steve, the question here, how do we go about doing that? Because the Democrats on Capitol Hill, first of all, it's all going to be state legal issues. So that's going to be determined with the state AG or the state legislature. There's nothing on Capitol Hill. Yeah, I guess you probably could do things, but the national Democrats are so beholden to the trial lobby that they're never going to go and give anything there because they're going to say, no, we have to safeguard the Aaron Brockoviches, the mesothelioma commercials, the Johnny Cochran ads that run every 10 seconds. But how do you go about supporting these small businesses so they feel comfortable reopening?
By the way, you're going to see those ads starting very quickly. The mesothelioma and the asbestos ads, all that stuff, boom, they'll be gone. This will be the new.
Looks like that.
Every casket has a lawyer, and my esteemed colleague Raheem Kassam, you better be tweeting that out because I'm stealing it as an homage. Every sneeze in the open, every sneeze has a lawyer.
Well, Schultz made a really good point about this yesterday. Remember, all of the insurance companies are regulated by state boards. So what might be very interesting to me on the backside of this, you see very liberal states screw up and default to the lawyers, and you see states in flyover country default to the little guy.
Okay, about federalism, the civics lesson, we're learning a lot about federalism. You've seen guys like Cuomo and these guys, quoting the Constitution. This is going to get back to those laboratories of democracy. So much of this is at the state level. You're seeing the presidents devolve. Basically, he had national emergency powers, but in their decision, devolved it back to the governors, both to shut it down and to open it up. Although you can't force anybody to open up, right? You can take the restrictions off. But in this, remember, and in the insurance context, you have two massive battles going on. This is not even the battle they're fighting right now. We were ahead of this, and now the White House is on it because the Wall Street Journal picked it up. This is the big one for the unlocking. There's a massive battle right now going on, and it's going to go back to the solvency of the insurance companies because they're saying about the disruption in business operations. Everybody just on the shutdown. So the shutdown's got its own insurance issue that it's the biggest lobbyist fight that's going on up here right now besides all the guys at the trough for the bailout money. This is a big one because the insurance guy said yesterday, says, hey, if you approve all these the cessation of business operations, all the insurance companies are going to be insolvent. Okay.
Well, it's like what I went back to said a week ago. The insurance companies are going to be arguing that this is an act of God. Unfortunately, they're going to be the only ones arguing that.
Well, the one on Garagos actually had in the policy, in Garagos' policy, I think he signed years ago, they had actually a clause that said no viruses, no pandemics, right? I mean, there was very specific. Now, he had some Garagos argument around this, some jujitsu that didn't impress the other counsel. They kind of dismissed it out of hand. But no, and I'm not taking the side of the insurance companies. Remember, I keep telling people all the time when they get in these policies, I said, hey, insurance companies have the highest margins of any financial institutions because their business is not paying on policies, okay? That's what they're in business for. So, or to settle up for something less than they had to. But that whole issue, this right here is going to get back. That's why these state openings, and I think if you're an insurance guy and you see the Liberate guys out there, thousands of them all jammed together going, hey, how organized is my tattoo parlor opening going to be? How organized is my hair, beauty salon? And I'm not putting I'm just saying for the Liberate guys, if you want to liberate and you want to open, it's got to be so smart and savvy how we do it. That's why I think guys like Mike DeWine and Greg Abbott, who have taken their states in two different states with different things going on, took it in pretty reflectively. Smart guys who always think about how do I what is Abbott and DeWine are known as what? Politicians know how to mitigate risk, and this is what we're talking about here. This has got to be done. Here's what you don't want to do: two things. Number one, open it up, start part one, and then not, come off track. And so part 2 and part 3 are already delayed, right? The other thing is start having an increase in deaths, where everybody says, oh, let's lock down again. Before we even get to Fauci's, it's coming back in October.
And the thing, with Governor DeWine, obviously we had him on Monday, and I think he's been just a profile in courage on how to do this right the whole way through. You take a look at Governor Abbott, who we've talked about in the last few days. We haven't talked about him a ton on the show. He's going to be a serious player for 2024.
Big time.
Big time player, the fundraising base, very...
did Ted Cruz is senator again because his ground game. His ground game is a work of art in the state of Texas. Work of art. I mean, this guy's he knows how to run a campaign. He knows how to run a state.
Yeah, and Dave Carney, his strategist, is pretty darn good too. I want to go to one thing. Just when we were kicking around some of the numbers, and Jack pointed out probably Saturday. Jack's right. Saturday will be, at least on the IHME model, when they project the death total to go over 50,000. When we talked about that May 25th, Memorial Day, that day that when they get below the 60, and that's kind of we called this last week, that it's really Memorial Day is when the country will be effectively, should be largely reopened back to normal. The death total on May 25th will be, at least they project, 67,000.
67,000 on May
25th.
May 25th.
Memorial Day.
Well, they're wrong. Just on their own, they're going to be wrong because you're going to be 60,000, and you're telling me we're going to be 60,000 on April 30th, essentially, and we're only going to have 7,000 for the entire month of May. This thing's going to completely drop off. Maybe, maybe all the waves are coming through. I'm just saying, if you look at the plateau that we're at, you haven't seen the drop. You haven't seen the beginning of the drop. Now, it looks like we're going to be Thursday. We're going to be 400 down today. Maybe it is. We'll recalculate. I'm just saying that what's concerned me is that we've hit a plateau, and that plateau is a lot higher than even they anticipated.
But they're saying that basically around that May 15th is when
you got
really
a pure drop.
Well, they say that's really when you get the daily drop off, and this thing's basically there. But then it gets down to it's marginal. Now, look. Again, I've beaten up the IHME model, I've beaten them up for moving the goalpost, shifting from the 0.3 deaths per million to 1 case per million. But this is a metric, and it's the most publicly available metric.
But this is what, and I don't want to politicize this, but this is what the mainstream media and the left is going to beat up Trump and all the governors for. The unlocking to say, hey, we had this schedule that was going to be a complete drop off down to 60 deaths throughout the country by May 15th, and you guys opened early because you didn't have mass on point. You don't have the mass. Because now all Jack's potions have been blown up. Fauci. No, I'm just saying. I'd love the hydroxy as long as your doctor recommends it. And I still think we're going to get huge evidence. We're going to try to get Dr. Zelenko in here. Of course, he's moving to new offices, we hear. So I guess that hydroxy thing is working. No. It's NIH and Fauci that are blowing up in the UVA test. So what? Here's my point. The mass on point, which is huge infusion of therapeutics, mass testing with contact tracing and quarantining, plus the antibodies testing. Those three for the mass on point, plus the sequestering of the elderly and the sick. That's the way you reopen. We're not going to really have any of those in place to do this, right? And the mainstream media is just going to jump on him as soon as we go over that university. My only point is that somebody ought to point it today to the mainstream media. The University of Washington, Miles, something's wrong because we're already here at 60.
Well, and I do want to just real quick, because I was just using them, and I want to make sure it's not clear that I'm not becoming an IHME homer. It's a study to go with. But for example,
the one they're using. What, right, it should be a homer. Because you picked it. You were the one that pointed out. If you hadn't said it this day on the show at the Seattle Times, nobody would have known about it.
Well, right, because this is where the media is going to go. These are the projections. Right. This was the concept of the rolling peaks. So to the issue of the rolling peaks, just over the last, they've had releases on the April 17th, 21st, and then on the 22nd, where they've talked about the reopening, when they can do that. And so Washington, for example, Washington State, April 17th, they were saying it was May 18th. And then just on the April 22nd, they then moved that to May 28th. So they already pushed that back by 10 days on the reopening. On the Arizona, when the IHME model came out on April 17th, they said Arizona's safe reopening day was June 8. This was because obviously each state and each metro area is different from the national. But in the one for the April 22nd release, they're now saying it's June 26th, a full 18 days later. That's
Arizona ain't waiting that long.
Right, exactly. So that my point is, when we talked earlier about their national numbers, that's one metric. But when you start breaking down state by state, you see that there is a whole lot of wiggle room. Kansas, just to put you into orbit here, on April 17th, IHME release, they're saying Kansas could safely reopen on June 1. Okay, a little bit behind the national curve. Now, on the April 22nd release, they're saying June 21. They've already moved this thing in the last couple of days by 20 days. States are going to be like, go pound sand. We're opening when we want to.
Particularly when you got the 60 number. Remember, we first calculated in Sanjay Gupta a couple weeks ago. Remember the day they had the thing up there, and Sanjay Gupta goes, the 60 deaths would be August 4th, and that was the correct number. You're saying that's pulled up 2 months. That's pulled up 60 days.
Let's remember something, though.
Remember, because we had that big argument, and Sanjay Gupta, Aaron Burnett goes, hey, I don't understand the math, and Sanjay Gupta, I tell you what he's talking about. The numbers, 60 deaths is going to be August 4th.
While we start talking about the numbers, let's remember the whole purpose of this exercise, closing down the country, social separating, flattening, smashing the curve. This was to make sure that our hospitals were not overwhelmed.
Yes.
They have not been overwhelmed.
Fine.
Right.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. John Solomon is going to join us from Just the News. Breaking story out of Fort Detrick. We'll return. The War Room Pandemic in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. Remember, ubiquitous now with 6.2 million downloads on our podcast. Of course, we got a big dog coming with a big dog podcast in this segment, the one and only John Solomon. He's going to be joining us in a moment. He's old school investigative reporter. In Capitol Hill, when your assistant walks in and says John Solomon on line 2, that's not a call you want to take. Okay, that's the sphincter muscle kind of tightens, right? That's not a call you want to take. Let's go to, before we get him on, there's a couple of things we got to go through. Jack, first off, Fauci, BARDA, UVA, VA, everybody's raining on your hydroxy parade. Tell us exactly what's going on. Because last night people were blowing me up. Jack's got to go through pages 11, 12, and 13, all the stuff. What's happening on hydroxychloroquine?
Well, I told everybody 3 days ago, look at bottom of page 12 through 13, where they have all their caveats about how, well, maybe bias worked.
Rachel Maddow, okay, to cut to the chase, Rachel Maddow says you're part of the biggest scam in American history, that you guys are selling a placebo that doesn't do anything, is misled her. But I'm just quoting Rachel Maddow. Well, that you, the president, who else? Sean Hannity, all of Fox News, Laura Ingraham, our great guy, Dr. Grace, right? Dr. Grace, but all of us. All of us. We just keep saying, for all the strike lawyers, you got to talk to your doctor.
If the president said, the sky was blue, Rachel Maddow would be outraged.
But why are all these coming out, and why is Fauci at NIH?
The only people who are so angry about this treatment are the people who see it as a positive for Donald Trump. And this shows you the strength of Trump derangement syndrome, in that they are more willing to slam a hopeful idea that many doctors around the world are finding very effective because it slams Trump.
Okay,
let me give you a rundown. Okay, Costa Rica is using this on the front line. Their doctors say that they have studied everything around the world. They are finding absolutely incredible responses. I think I went through yesterday how silly that UVA NIH study was, where they just looked back retrospectively. They effectively decided that they didn't like hydroxychloroquine, and they proved it by plugging the data in such a way as to get it. There's no consistency as to when these guys got treatment, how sick they were. 33% of them had lung disease problems before they even got the COVID-19. They were all above a certain age. It was a very bad study.
Where's the wave of doctors who used it in New York, like Dr. Zelenko? Where's the second wave of those guys saying, we use this is why our casualty rates are down, we put people on the IV? Where's the anecdotal pushback on that from all the heroes up in Seattle and in New York that use this? Where are they?
I think they've been muzzled. We've seen this quite a bit from the hospitals. We had Grace on, and he wanted to talk to us. And remember that he was told he couldn't get into specificity about it. But I think anecdotally, you were hearing around the world. Bahrain, for example, little Bahrain, has been using this from day one.
Little wealthy Bahrain.
Right. Probably not noted for the best healthcare on planet Earth or probably the most healthy lifestyles of their residents. But they have one of the lowest mortality rates in the world, and they've been using this. There's another study that just came out of Korea 2 days ago where they went back and they looked at using this prophylactically. They had a number of patients that were exposed to a very sick person, a number of doctors, and immediately they thought, hey, why don't we just put these people on and see if we can keep them from getting it? And universally, none of those people developed the disease. Now, granted, for Dr. Fauci, this is a bit anecdotal, and I would hate to give a little bit of sunlight to Donald Trump, but I am going to stick with my position that hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin given early are very effective.
By your doctor's recommendation. If your doctor recommends,
I'm just an individual with an opinion.
His name is Jack. His name is Jack.
Responsibility for my
His name is Jack Maxey, and I can't give you his address. No, we're going to get to Azar and those guys. I want to bring John Solomon on. John Solomon, the veteran, the dean of the investigative reporters in Washington, D.C. That used to be a huge compliment, John, but since there's like three of you guys now, it's like it's a dean of a community college, not an Ivy.
Rex. We hardly exist anymore.
But it tells you what's happened to the media here. Your site, Just the News, is a huge hit, and of course your podcast, because you rank ahead of us. We get the green-eyed monster on it. The John Solomon Report. You got to go to the podcast. Solomon's unique, complete old school. The reason I want to have you on today, you have broken something that we've talked about, but of course you get the inside baseball. Fort Detrick. Explain to the American people exactly. You got a big breaking story out of Fort Detrick. What is Fort Detrick? Why is it important? And what's your story?
Yeah, so it's a very important installation. It's an Army installation in Frederick, Maryland. Before the 1970s, it was where we developed bioweapons. When the United States was still in the bioweapons race, we signed a treaty, we got out of that business, and then we converted the lab to be a biodefense lab so that if someone deployed either intentionally or unintentionally a pathogen, we would have defenses for our military and for our civilian population. So it mostly is very secretive. People don't know much about it. It usually is very quiet out of the news media, except back in the early 2000s where it was ground zero for the investigation of the anthrax attacks. If everyone remembers, after 9/11, there were some senators who had anthrax mailed to them, some media members, and there were two suspects that were identified there, one falsely accused, or at least the FBI says was falsely accused, a guy named Stephen Hatfield. He was eventually cleared, but he was one bioweapons expert there. And then a second guy, Bruce Ivins, the FBI began looking at him. He committed suicide, and the FBI ultimately concluded that he was the perpetrator of the anthrax attacks. Not everybody shares that assessment of the FBI. The FBI has had some criticism. But that's about the only time Fort Detrick's ever really been in the news recently. But they do really valuable work.
Dr. Hatfield was the very first guy we hired here as a consultant at War Room Pandemic, because when we started this back in January, as I always do, I said, I want the smartest guy out there, and everybody said, oh, it's Hatfield up at Fort Detrick, and so he's been our advisor and consultant, great guy, and falsely accused
amazing brand, and someone who went through hell for a bad investigation. Yeah, false accusations.
Yeah, you want to talk about Richard Jewell is nothing compared to Hatfield. Hatfield, they want to throw in prison and give the death sentence to and turn over. Okay, so Fort Detrick is the old Army bioweapons lab before we signed this huge treaty in the 70s. Everybody laid down their arms and stopped. Under Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese communists signed it in '84. Fessed up that they had a bioweapons program, and then when they built the P4 lab in Wuhan, they had to also kind of come clean with. They had a tiny program. They said from '84 to 2004 or 5 or 10, whatever it was, they had a small program. At Fort Detrick, How have you built relationships, and what are the people up there telling you about potential therapeutics, potential vaccines, or potential biological defenses?
Well, the military has a huge interest in making sure that its personnel, if ever subjected to a weapon, or if you're just overseas in Africa, you're fighting the war on terror, and all of a sudden Ebola breaks out, right? The military wants to protect our frontline men and women, and so they do really great research. They're as capable and perhaps more capable than the NIH and CDC, and so they have a wonderful doctor there by the name of Dr. John Dye. He is really doing some of the cutting-edge research on viruses that are called envelope viruses, which COVID-19 is. Ebola is. That's a pretty scary one. Marburg virus, another very scary virus. Back in 2017, they tested a chemical. It's an extract that comes out of a flower that's all in our yards, oleander. The flower is famous because if your dog eats too much of it, he can get sick because it has a poison in it. But there's an extract called oleandrin. And they saw this working in some cancer patients across the country. It was very successful, and it's getting a lot of publicity. They said it may work on these envelope viruses. So they did a big study in 2017, and sure as heck, they confirmed in Petri dishes that if you put oleandrin in alongside of Ebola, one of the scariest viruses in the world, Marburg, another scary one, it kills it. It neutralizes it. Emphatically. In fact, it wasn't, a small finding. It was overwhelming evidence that it reacts against it. So they passed that on now to try to get that into the next level of testing in humans in clinical trials. Meanwhile, they're sitting back there saying, well, wait a second, COVID-19 is just like Ebola and Marburg. It's an envelope virus. So they began last week a clinical trial, a in vitro trial, a Petri dish trial, to see if it is going to kill the COVID virus. There's a lot of enthusiasm that this test will be positive and that the next move will then be to try to put it into a clinical trial. There's a lot of excitement about this extract. It's catching a lot of attention in the cancer community. It now has very strong findings that it worked against Ebola and Marburg, and now they have a growing confidence that this could be a solution for COVID. And so the process would be they'd get through these in vitro things, they do a clinical trial. If it showed efficacy there, they will be able to deploy this medicine very quickly. Why? Because oleander is everywhere. It's all over the United States. Getting the extract out is very easy. So a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement, a lot of work still to be done, but I wouldn't be surprised if Fort Detrick becomes one of the more important players in the fight against COVID.
I want to talk about that for a second, John. Is that the American people, you've seen, the CDC, either we don't know the details of how, when President Trump said, hey, you guys are going to do the test, they go, yes, we'll do the testing. Somehow that didn't quite work out. There's some negative articles we'll talk about in a second about Azar. There's some other things at NIH, Fauci is maybe not being as precise and as metric oriented as we would like him to be. I think the American people are sitting there going, exactly what's going on. What's the level of professionalism at Fort Detrick?
It's a lean, mean crowd. It's a small group. They have great connections across the world. They're very well respected. They have good connections in the private sector. And look what President Trump had to do when the CDC and the NIH were struggling and let us down on the early testing. He turned to the private sector. And, there's a reason why our founding fathers might have put in God we trust, but never put in government we trust on the dollar bill, because big bureaucracies like the CDC and NIH often freeze up in the moment of crisis. Fort Detrick is a lean, mean fighting machine. It comes out of the military, get-it-done crowd, and they're able to move quickly. Look, in the time we've heard about solutions that weren't working, they already put a test into place that's going to be done probably by next week. That's how quick they move at this lab. So it's a small, very effective, very high-profile, very well-resourced, and very well-respected lab. It's just one we don't talk about. But I bet you that we're going to learn something very important out of this test in the next couple of weeks.
The Media Matters guys, always on the first couple of days, they always laugh at us, the conspiracy wingnuts. It all comes true, Media Matters. You never have the kind of thing when we said, hey, this stuff all comes through about the P2 lab and the P4 lab with Cotton and Gertz and all of them. But, John, just before I let you go, I got about a minute. What's your assessment as you see it today as an investigative reporter of where we actually stand with real investigations on both the P2 CDC lab in Wuhan and the P4 lab in Wuhan? Where do you think we stand with investigations right now?
Well, the most important thing is human, right? You need human intelligence to know what's going on. I think everything's at a very preliminary stage. We went from, this is definitely something in the wild, to we got some suspicions about this lab. I think the prevailing theory is that it was a animal virus, and the only question is, did it go animal to human, or did someone accidentally, perhaps doing legitimate work in the lab in China, accidentally walk out with it on its clothes and get it into the population? I think that's the question they're looking at. But my sources tell me they don't have any strong intelligence yet, and they got to do a lot more work to get us an answer.
John, tell us how people get to your podcast, how they get to your Twitter feed, your site, everything. We want to make sure people get total access to John Solomon.
Yeah, so justthenews.com is where we have a group of about 15 reporters doing investigative and breaking news reporting all day. My podcast is John Solomon Reports. You can go to Apple Podcasts and download it there. And my handle on Twitter is J Solomon Reports.
John, thank you very much. Look forward to having you back on the show. Fantastic.
My pleasure, Steve. Thank you for the time.
That guy's old school. That's like a brontosaurus right there, right? He's when he comes in on you, and of course they always laugh and make fun. It's all this. He's got all the Ukraine stuff, right? Well,
the thing I love about him is he's a guy who never gives up.
Relentless.
This guy is just like a pit bull.
You don't want the literally. It's John Solomon on line 2. That's because it's not going to go away. Okay. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. I just want you to keep in mind, because we do have a logic the way we do the show. We don't have human intelligence. Coming up in the next hour, Jim Hoft has got breaking news about some human intelligence coming out of Wuhan. And then later we're going to talk about in the next hour, Miles Guo. I think there might be a defector from the Wuhan lab.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We're all here. Jack Maxey's actually taking a short break. He's out going long Olander. What is it? Jack is rounding up he's in the neighborhood looking at the daffodils. Where's the Olander?
I will say, not that we're giving economic advice, but this is a retrospective study. Sold every single thing on February 21st and dropped a little bit on the side into Gilead Science, which is at, I think, $83 today.
So hopefully that works out for you. That's why, no offense, every time I see the 90 guys who are doing vaccines, you see the stock pop right away. It's a sucker's play. There is no vaccine. And my guy at Roche backed me up. He says, I think the 18 months is a little aggressive, right? No vaccine on SARS. And somebody told me, Fauci says there's not a vaccine on SARS. They said they had one in early stages, but there wasn't enough money in it. Hey, nobody checked with the Chinese. They got 2 labs over there. They're cooking bats every day, right? We're going to have Jim Hoft in the next hour. He's got the bat lady on for doing some more stuff.
He completely described that incorrectly. And what's so important about the failure of the first SARS vaccine...
So shocked at that.
It is that it highlights how dangerous these vaccines are. The mice have developed antibodies. They gave them the live virus, and literally they went into absolute chaos in their lungs. And they died quicker than they would have if they hadn't even gotten the vaccine. That was the last attempt.
One of the reasons we want to have John Solomon on here, and he gave a shout out to Dr. Stephen Hatfield, as you know, one of the original posse, still around, but currently engaged, working every day to help solve these problems for the American people. And we're going to have Dr. Hatfield back on next week, telephonically or through Skype. Is that Fort Detrick is going to be, just remember, write it down, Fort Detrick is going to be an important player going forward in your life, okay? So Fort Detrick will be, remember that, up in Maryland, okay? In Frederick, Maryland, Fort Detrick. Let's go to talk about Dr. Fauci and pulling a team together. We got to pull the country together, right? We're going to start doing these openings. You got to pull the country together. You got to pull our allies together. G7 or the guys in Europe having a big call today, because remember, we're nationalists, but we're in an inextricably linked economy. Europe's got to come out of this thing. They're our trading partner. You got to pull the world together, but you got to pull also the administration together. They're all what happened. There's a couple of stories out that are like neutron bombs, right? I mean, these are pretty big stories. The Wall Street Journal story, and then I think it was Reuters.
Yeah, so front page Wall Street Journal story today by Rebecca Ballhaus and Stephanie Armour. And this is, I guess I would describe this, or Steve, you
with an assist by Michael Bender.
This was a drive-by shooting. I mean, this reminds me of Boys in the Hood when Ricky and Trey come out of the little deli shop or the convenience store, and then they see the bad guys pull up in the car and they take off down the alley, and then Ricky gets the double barrels. Then he's. Why
did you say it? Vicious tearing up already?
I know that's
Fish giving the head nod. He's tearing up.
Morris Chestnut, rest in peace. It was a great movie from early '90s. So I'm just going to read you the first sentence of this.
Okay, Boomer.
Okay. Actually, that's pretty accurate. Here's just the first sentence. Wall Street Journal front page. On January 29th, Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar told President Trump the coronavirus epidemic was under control.
Boom.
That's one sentence opening lead. Let me just read that again. Front page, Wall Street Journal, today, Washington. On January 29th, Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar told President Trump the coronavirus epidemic was under control. It doesn't matter. Now, the thing goes on for another 40 paragraphs. It doesn't matter anything else. I mean, that is a straight up, he just got rickied. Right there. I mean, Alex Azar just got rickied. I mean, a car pulled up, some guys in sunglasses, double-barrel shotgun, they got him. And that is, now, I'm going to tell you why, and obviously I'm kind of, just throwing in a little bit of movie reference humor, but here's why I don't like this. Because as we get into the story, we find out about Brian Harrison, his chief of staff who worked for HHS under the George W. Bush administration, the Labradoodle guy.
Hold it. And they have a Reuters story that comes out afterwards that just solely works on the chief of staff. And I think Labradoodle is in the headlines.
Yeah.
It was a double hit.
It was a double hit, yeah. And here's the problem with, and then we have what was the gentleman's name? The doctor who may or may not have gotten bounced.
Barta. Ricky, the president didn't remember his name.
Rick Bright.
Rick Bright.
Yeah, Rick Bright. Here's the problem with going after. All you're doing on the day when you have Jim Clyburn and you have the House investigative panel.
They get voted in today, right?
Yes. What happens is all you're doing when you have these hit pieces like this, only thing it does is encourage people. You know what? Maybe I just need to look out for myself, and maybe I just need to start dishing and causing further chaos. Now, I'm not saying that
Azar's obviously going to get a call this afternoon. It's Clyburn on line 2. Right?
Yeah. I mean, look, and that's the thing. I mean, when you
want to schedule you to come in for a chat.
No, I mean, Jim Clyburn looks at this like, oh, we got a sucker. We're going to go after Azar. We're going to put pressure on Azar, put the pressure on Harrison.
That's the guy that's going to roll for us.
Yep, we're going to put the pressure on Rick Bright.
Rick Bright put in a he's a whistleblower. He's already Vindman. He's put in a whistleblower. Right? We don't know officially, but it's been said that he was so upset he put in a whistleblower.
Now there are a couple buried leads that are in this Wall Street Journal story. We've long said, because Redfield said that he got that call. I know, Steve, we've kind of argued on this. Did he get it right around? It was during his Christmas break. Did he get it on Christmas? Did he get it January 1st? Did he get it January 3rd? We've heard a couple of different dates that have been thrown out. It says definitively, but we've always said
It says Redfield called Azar on January 2nd. 3rd. Called him.
CDC alerts.
Called him.
Yeah, CDC alerts HHS chief.
Bannon wins.
On the 3rd.
Bannon wins. He was the last week of December. He's on the phone. I'm going to pull that thing up. Redfield's on the phone on his Christmas break between Christmas and New Year's, talking nonstop. And he notifies him on the 3rd when he's got his act together. Here's what it is. Boom.
Redfield has previously said publicly he got the call on January 1st and then January 3rd.
Okay. He says that. I thought he said the Christmas break.
Yes, but he was on vacation during that stretch. But he's given multiple days.
I'm going to fight you every. This is like the old war room, right?
It is.
No, Steve, there's no way Redfield was ahead of us, right?
Well, you're December 26th. You're pretty early. Of course, Miles Groh taught me. He says, "Hey, I did a broadcast. Heck with you guys." He said, "I did a broadcast on December 31st," and he did.
But keep in mind, Redfield. This is why it's important. Remember, he said he got that call from China.
It's very important.
This is important.
And it's going to be definitely important in August when you're watching when you're going to watch the hearings, because they're coming. Oh, we don't want to go back and look at history. We just want to do it. That's what Nancy Pelosi said. We just want to look on a go forward basis.
Here's why that's important, because yesterday we talked about that fake news Washington Post story from Lena Sun that said that there were CDC members embedded over the WHO, and the lead implies that they were transmitting real time information in late 2019. Right. That goes against what Redfield has said.
Yes.
So this is why this is important, because again, Washington Post, this story, actually 2 days in a row, because we're going to talk about devastating in the headline. 2 Lena Sun stories, back-to-back days, Washington Post, fake news.
Let's go. We're going to take a short commercial break. Be back for the second hour, China and all of this in a moment.